During today's webinar, we will review the different methodologies in which transactions can be input into Cube Billing's cost allocation and cross-charging system. When we look at the different types of transactions that may go into the Cube's database, we first find that we need to have the ability to manually input transactions into the database itself. And what we have done is we have integrated the ability to utilize Excel with the capabilities of the Cube database. In the Cube database, what we expect to see is the information organized within Excel in a certain manner, then have the ability to input that data into the database. So what we have seen on this screen are two different things. One, we've been able to go in to the system, browse, and upload a transaction. So we can upload a transaction, hit open, and when we hit the submit the file, what will happen is the Excel file will go into the database will do all of its error checking, and it will then send an email to the email addresses listed. And the email response will indicate whether or not the data was successfully loaded into the database or not. So we'll hit submit file, and at this time, all that information is going into the database for error checking. As we can see here below, some of the information that we've put into the database hasn't successfully processed. So we have two different line items where we have data errors. And what the system allows us to do is it allows us to open up the file to understand why we had errors within the database. So we can open up the file within Excel, and the Excel file, it will look exactly like the input file we put into the database. So when we start to look at the different types of information that are needed within the database to process transactions, we see a few different things. What we have to have in order to upload data into the database, we need to know where the delivery organization resides. So who provided the service or the product that's being consumed. We then have the second column would be the products or services being consumed by the client location. So this is what was actually performed. We need to know the volume, and we need to know who received those processes or those products and services. The next column indicates how often we need to charge for those services. Is this a one-time fee where we charge it one time, or is it something that occurs on a month-over-month basis? We have the ability to input a start and end date, and then we also have the ability to allocate cost from one location to many recipient organizations that consumed a product or service. The next column outlines what is the name of the asset. So for a server, we may have a host name, and then we have the ability to tie that within another unique identifier. And this could be a serial number or something else that you use to help identify the services you provided. It has a space for notes for additional information, and then in our error message we see why the file wasn't uploaded. So we can see that the receiving cost center did not exist. Recipient organization, the 1111, has not been set up within the Cube database. When we scroll down, we can look through all the different types of information to see if we have other error messages. And as we can see, we had some one-time charges, and the billing name doesn't exist. So the server setting up the server, that component didn't exist within the database. But this would be a one-time fee, so we would charge it for one individual month, and then it would be finished. And that appears to be all of the error messages that we had, or the receiving cost center didn't exist, and the billing name didn't exist. The one last thing we may want to point out would be in the last four items, we have an individual location, provided a single service, a server asset management. So this might be a asset management organization. The organization had an expense of $58,000 in that given month, and what they wanted to do was allocate it across the four different clients that consume their services. And what we were able to do is we were able to tie together the single transaction with a unique identifier, the 1111, and allocate the percentages for each client. So we could allocate 3% to the first client, 30% to the second, 60% to the third, and 7% to the fourth. So it equals 100%. So when we go back to the screen, we can hit refresh, and this will refresh the screen. As we can see, the Excel file has now successfully processed. So under the status, we show that it is successful. An email has been sent that outlined the number of transactions that were successfully processed and downloaded into the system, so we know it worked. And within this file that we submitted and processed, we had one delivery location supporting 4 separate clients and had over 30,000 transactions within this Excel file. So it has the ability to download many thousands or hundreds of thousands of rows of data within any upload process and processing transaction. The second way to upload a transaction is to do it individually, one by one. And so what we can do is we can add a new transaction, and within the transaction we can fill in the exact same columns that we had seen in the Excel upload file and insert the transaction in and of itself. Here are the two ways in which the transactions can be manually input into the Cube Billing Solutions cost allocation and cross-charging system. If you and your requirements require an API interface or an automated way to move data from your source systems directly into the Cube Billing database, we can help you perform those functions as well. Just give us a call. Thank you.